Israel is killing Palestinians at unprecedented rates at a time when Israel is bombing hospitals, ambulances, refugee camps, deliberately targeting journalists and their entire families, at a time when Israel has flattened most of Gaza, rendering it uninhabitable. There's a select group of individuals, we call them liberals, that aren't quite focused on that. They're more focused on making sure people don't call this genocide.
I think Israel's goal is to eliminate Hamas. I think they have the moral authority to do so. Unfortunately, there's a high cost right now of civilian casualties. I'm not sure there's any way to avoid that at the moment. I'm not sure there's any way to avoid that at the moment. I'm not sure there's any way to avoid that at the moment. I'm not sure there's any way to avoid that at the moment. I'm not sure.
Yeah, how could they avoid that? That's crazy. Damn, I don't have a cool story about following you. Always was a leftist and came across your vids on YouTube in 2019 and started following you on Twitch instead. Yep. There's a lot of that too. And that's great as well. That's not like, it doesn't have to be cool. Who gives a shit? All right, let's go.
There's any way to avoid that at the moment. No other fighting force in the world does what Israel does when it comes to warning people about imminent attacks.
This guy, what's his name? Destiny, I think. Yeah, he's like some type of influencer, internet guy. He is one of the loudest of such liberals that really just don't like hearing the G word when we're talking about what Israel is doing right now. Destiny went on a Twitter storm the other day. We're going to read these tweets. We're going to see how he justifies this assertion. And yeah, that's today's video, and hope you enjoy. If Israel wanted to genocide Palestinians, then they would only exist in the history books. Okay, yeah, so we see what's going on there. So
that's a wild fucking openly genocidal take. It's just like, did you tell Noah to make this video? No. Why the f would I do that? He sees the same shit I see.
Because Israel hasn't wiped all Palestinians off the face of the earth, then they have yet to commit a genocide. That's what's being expressed here, right? If you read the UN's definition of genocide, any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. There's no requirement or stipulation for total annihilation. If that were the case, a lot of genocides, most genocides would not meet the definition. A notable one being the Holocaust. Yeah. The logic in this tweet implies that because some Jews survived the Holocaust, the Nazis must not have wanted it that bad, because if they had, they would have succeeded. Anybody else sense that? There's Hitler particles emanating?
An even better argument, in my opinion, is the Armenian genocide, because famously, the Armenian population transfer and subsequent genocide that happened was not conducted in the same severity in other areas that weren't in the eastern part of Turkey at the time. So it's like the counter to this always going to be, hey, like, well, we stopped them. We stopped the Nazis from doing a genocide. That's bullshit. Like, blah, 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 right? But with the Armenian genocide, there was no such interference, I would say. And yet there was still, that is a documented genocide that was a documented genocide that did not impact in the same degree or the same severity the Armenian population in Istanbul, as far as I understand, is still a documented genocide, or the indigenous populations in the United States of America. There are still Native Americans. It's just that like like the superior might of one military over the other does not factor into whether something is considered a genocide or not, you know? Ridiculous. That has nothing to do with the genocide convention.
From this tweet, journalist Mehdi Hasan responded to that last tweet from Destiny, writing, per this argument, China isn't guilty of genocide in Xinjiang because the Uyghurs still exist. Same with Russia in Ukraine. And Destiny quote tweeted this, writing, China is guilty of genocide because they are intentionally trying to eliminate a group of people, and it shows. There is no evidence of Israel doing this to Palestinians today. No evidence. Just, there's nothing. It's like, oh, shoot, okay. It feels weird. Everyone's like really up in arms about what's going on. Are they just making it up? Oh, hold on, hold the fort. I just found something on my computer. It's an 84-page document submitted to the International Court of Justice that outlines in detail with citations the plethora of evidence of Israel's genocidal actions and intent. Chat, is this real? Is this a thing? Just to preface, this document and application is pretty unprecedented. The ICJ—
This is also silly, as the ISIS crimes against the Yazidis killed 5,000, but was still considered a likely genocide due to the intent and the actions by ISIS. Yes, every other form of genocide that has happened throughout history would be not considered genocide by the standards that you can see with your own two eyes by looking at the actual makings of a genocide and comparing it to Israel's actions, which is, you know, what the International Court of Justice is doing currently. But yeah,
UN's
the Rohingya genocide, the Bosnian genocide, these are all genocides that would not be considered genocide by the standard that he is trying to apply here.
highest court. It's the world court, basically. And after hearing South Africa's case against Israel, they ended up ruling that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. They fell short of calling for a ceasefire, but they did order, with near unanimous approval, that Israel must halt any actions in Gaza that could constitute genocide, which, according to the ICJ, they are currently plausibly undertaking. There is no evidence that Israel has changed anything about their rhetoric or military strategy in the months since this ruling, so by the court's logic, the final verdict should be obvious, but unfortunately, we likely won't see that conclusion for at least another few years, because we live in hell. Okay, enough yapping. We're starting on page 30, section C. Genocidal acts committed against the Palestinian people. This section provides an overview of the acts in which Israel is engaged that are genocidal in character, having regard to their nature, scope, and context. These acts are ongoing in a conflict context, where Israel is deliberately imposing telecommunications blackouts on Gaza and restricting access by fact-finding bodies and international media. Section 1 outlines the actions defined as killing Palestinians in Gaza. It goes over the death toll, which is actually out of date. Currently, it's sitting at 28,000, not 21,000. The percentage of women and children killed, which is 70. The 15,000 people that are reported missing, probably dead under the rubble. Palestinians have been killed in their homes, in shelters, in hospitals, in schools, churches, mosques, literally just trying to find food and water for their families. Killed while evacuating, killed in the zones by which they're supposed to be evacuated to. And by evacuate, that means displaced. It means kicked out, homes destroyed, can't come back. Multiple instances of Israeli soldiers performing summary execution. One account was of at least 11 members of the Anan family and their relatives, boys and men, said to have been separated out by Israeli shoulders and shot in front of their family, before the women and children were then attacked. Unarmed people, including Israeli hostages, being shot dead on sight, despite posing no threat, even while waving white flags.
But also, I see him as a mercenary. Like, I think he just is the type of person who wants the aesthetics of winning a debate over anything else. That's it. It's just blood sport. He does that, but that's not his like overarching ideological intent. I think it's simply just he wants to argue positions. It doesn't really matter. He likes the clout, and he does it specifically so that when he assumes a position, he just like goes balls to the wall on said position as aggressively as he can. And in this circumstance, he has taken on a position that is objectively at odds with what the truth is that many people can see. Loner Box and his orbiters are the exact same. I don't know. Everything that I've seen from Loner Box.
Can first broadcast pictures of a Palestinian man in a group carrying a white flag in Gaza who was shot dead. The Israeli military told us it was not aware of the incident. It then said we had edited the pictures.
They knocked down the front wall and entered the house. We were sitting down having lunch at the time. Then my brother Mohammed was shot. He was at the front, waving a white flag.
For Palestinian children in particular, death is everywhere and nowhere is safe. A total of over 7,729 Palestinian children have been killed in Gaza to date. The scale of Palestinian child killings in Gaza is such that United Nations chiefs have described it as a graveyard for children. Indeed, the unprecedented rate of Palestinian child casualties has prompted UNICEF's spokesperson to call Israel's attacks on Gaza a war on children. Doctors, journalists, teachers, academics, and other professionals are also being killed at wholly unprecedented rates. To date, Israel has killed over 311 doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers, including doctors and ambulance drivers killed on duty, 103 journalists, which is now closer to 120, amounting to over...
Yeah, it is pretty wild that, like, Israel is so horny to kill Palestinians that they sometimes kill the Israeli hostages that they think might be secretly Palestinian, that are also waving white flags. So, make with that information what you will.
One per day, and over 73% of the total number of journalists and media workers killed globally in 2023. 40 civil defense workers responsible for helping to dig victims out of the rubble killed while on duty, and over 209 teachers and educational staff. 144 United Nations employees have also been killed, the highest number of aid workers killed in UN history in such a short time. In addition to being killed by Israeli weaponry, Palestinians in Gaza are also at immediate risk of death by starvation, dehydration, and disease as a result of the ongoing siege by Israel. The insufficient aid being allowed through to the Palestinian Palestinian population and the extreme difficulties in distributing such limited aid that is permitted to enter the territory due to the decimation of Gaza's infrastructure in Israel's military attacks. Israelis sitting in front of the aid trucks to block them from entering Gaza is also not helping. Surprise, surprise. Celebrating too, laughing when it happens. Absolutely fucking depraved.
Dozens of protesters have demonstrated outside a major Israeli seaport opposing the delivery of humanitarian aid.
Hey, we're going to take a break from this very upsetting material real quick to talk about today's quite relevant sponsor, Ground News. Seeing what's happening in Gaza play out on the news and on our social media feeds can be confusing. It's hard to know what information to trust when it's being thrown at us so often, usually without enough context. So I can't think of a more perfect sponsor for today's video than Ground News. Ground News app and website gathers related news articles on any topic from around the world in one place and shows me the source's political leaning, reliability, and ownership, so I can assess how different news outlets are framing this conflict. For example, when Israel airstruck Rafah, the supposed refugee camp in the south of Gaza, killing at least 67 Palestinians, I used Ground News to see how that story was covered. 472 news outlets reported on this, with a fairly equal amount of coverage coming from the left, center, and right-leaning sources, according to bias ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. And since there are so many misleading narratives out there, I filtered the articles by highest factuality, so I only see news from the most reliable outlets. Articles on the left seem to focus on how this attack is affecting Palestinian civilians.
Sometimes it's on accident, but you know what I mean?
The ones being displaced into the only supposed place of refuge, only to be, bombed, airstruck. Center-rated sources gave the more detached details of just how these bombs were dropped on the refugee camp, and articles on the right tended to lead with this conflict's effect on Israelis and the Israeli hostages. Most people never read beyond article headlines, so the ability to compare the framing from hundreds of news outlets all at once with tools that help me surface the best information is a game changer. So go to ground.news/Noah to try Ground News for yourself. Plans start at $1 per month, but you can get 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan by using my link. Ground News is supported by their subscribers and doing important work that no other news outlets are doing, so I encourage you to check them out. Alright, now let's get back to the video. Section number 2, which is about bodily and mental harm to Palestinians in Gaza. Mind you, this is 2 of 8, and yeah, we're going to go through them all because I feel like I haven't seen that done in any major Western media outlets or content. I'm sure it has been, but just in case, if you haven't seen it, we're doing it. 55,000 Palestinians have been wounded in Israel's military attacks since October 7th. The majority of them women and children. Burns and amputations are typical injuries. There's an estimated 1,000 children that have lost one or both legs. Reports of Israeli forces using white phosphorus in densely populated areas. Even small amounts of white phosphorus can cause deep and severe burns, penetrating through the bone and capable of reigniting after initial treatment. There are no functioning hospitals in the north of Gaza, soon to be none in the south as well. Of the 12 that existed, only 7 are operational, such that injured persons are reduced to waiting to die, unable to seek surgery or medical treatment beyond first aid, dying slow, agonizing deaths from their injuries or from resultant infections. The extreme levels of bombardment and lack of any safe areas are also causing severe mental trauma in the Palestinian population in Gaza. Even before the latest onslaught, Palestinians in Gaza suffered severe trauma from prior attacks. 80% of Palestinian children experienced higher levels of emotional distress, demonstrating bedwetting and reactive mutism, and engaging in self-harm and suicidal thoughts. 11 weeks of relentless bombardment, displacement, and loss will necessarily have led to a further increase in those figures, particularly for the estimated tens of thousands of Palestinian children who have lost at least one parent and those who are the sole surviving members of their families.
On the second floor, there's a 5-year-old boy who was hit by a grenade. A fragment passed through his eye and lodged in his brain. But that's just part of Mumin's story. His brother and sister watched it all.
It was lunchtime. We were sitting down.
11-year-old Ahmed Hattab was in the kitchen when Israeli soldiers broke into the family home.
I love that Noah is using this as a jump off point to talk about the real issue. Normally, the way that debate purgatory and drama baiters operate is they don't care about the issues at all, and they will simply farm for the sake of farming because there's no other underlying ideological position. A lot of these people that will be like, Hasan doesn't know what he's talking about, he's making shit up, they only care about making money in terms of ad revenue, right? That's their goal. Noah, on the other hand, seemingly is doing the exact opposite. He's utilizing the obvious reaction that this will garner from the likes of Destiny and others, right? Because he's bringing this controversial figure to the center of this conversation while simply using him as a jump-off point to talk about the actual issues on the ground. I really like what he did here. If you notice, it's very rarely about Destiny's idiotic takes about how there is no genocide happening or how there is no ethnic cleansing happening in Gaza. Because he cares. He cares about the actual issue.
They raided our house and they shot our mum and dad. Then they started shooting at us.
His sister, Buthena, is 9.
We went to another room, hiding from the soldiers. They started banging on the door, and then they blew it up.
Point 53 gives examples of actions taken to intentionally cause psychological distress, specifically with regards to education and how the system is being completely disrupted by the bombing. It's even worse in reality than it looks. It's the amount of suffering is just something incomparable. It's really unbearable. I'm speechless when I try and think of the future of these children. It's generations of children who will be handicapped, who will be traumatized. The very children in our mental health programs are telling us that they would rather die than continue living in Gaza now. Large numbers of Palestinian civilians, including children, have reportedly been arrested, blindfolded, forced to undress and remain outside in the cold weather before being forced onto trucks and taken to unknown locations. Medics and first responders in particular have been repeatedly detained by Israeli forces, with many being detained incommunicado at unknown locations. Videos published by Israeli media on Christmas Day appear to show hundreds of Palestinians rounded up inside Al Yarmouk football stadium in Gaza City, including children, older people, and persons with disabilities being forced to strip to their underwear in degrading conditions. Many Palestinian detainees who have been released report having been subjected to torture and ill treatment, including the deprivation of food, water, shelter, and access to toilets. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports video footage showing bruises and burns on the bodies of detainees, images of mutilated and burned corpses alongside videos of armed attacks by Israeli soldiers filed as exclusive content from the Gaza Strip are reportedly circulated in Israel via a social media Telegram channel called 72 Versions Uncensored.
This is a picture of Palestinians
praying
for those
so
who
gross.
have been killed by Israel. In the accompanying post, the dead are compared to, quote, a large shipment of fresh baked goods straight from the shawarma. A comment reads, quote, I asked for a medium rare, make a new one. And then there's this, a dead body is being pulled by a vehicle across the...
This, by the way, was actually posted by an Israeli journalist who was embedded with the IDF at the time. If I remember correctly, this is literally not like a Israeli occupying force soldier like posting this. I'm pretty sure it was a journalist that was embedded with them that posted it.